Hey guys, if you want our help in setting up a personalized meal plan or a personalized training program, or both, we can actually do that online for you on our platform and get that done through website, Robin.
Yep. So jump on www.lntonline.co.nz, sign up. We'll have the questionnaire, fill that out. We'll take care of the rest.
Awesome.
Are you trying to make this a challenge? Holy hecker. This is good.
This is
really
nice.
This is nice.
Really nice.
Welcome back.
Welcome back, everyone. Welcome to the LNT Podcast. It's a lifestyle where we talk about science and health in a not so scientific manner.
Well, we try our best anyway. Yeah.
Just so everyone can understand. And today we're going to be talking about diet and sleep and the association between the two. So we know that sleep and nutrition is a necessity to life, but many of us don't know that there is an association between the two, and diet itself can affect sleep, and sleep can affect diet. So we'll be looking at that relationship specifically today.
Yeah, it's going to be a great topic for a lot of people, as people are wanting a good night's sleep in this day and age. Obviously, we're in an era where a lot of people are go-getters and working a lot, leading to burnout and various other issues here. And this is why we want to do this podcast for the viewers. Generally, sleep is decreased as we get older, mostly in elderly populations. And in New Zealand, there was a research conducted and revealed that 45% of the population that undertook this study actually have symptoms of sleep insomnia. And in the States alone, 35% have at least once a week sleep insomnia symptoms. So that's basically unable to fall asleep, feeling tired the following morning upon waking, and that's having a good night's sleep, feeling sleepiness and ongoing tiredness during the day, having cognitive dysfunction, which is not being able to remember things very well and so forth. So sleep is absolutely important. Important for everyone.
100%. And I think looking at our lifestyles in general nowadays, where you've got family, kids, work is so busy, sometimes things get in the way, and many of us understand that at a restful 7 to 8 hour sleep is what we need, but sometimes things get in the way and it's difficult. And that's why we want to highlight this topic today and also see if sleep itself is actually having an effect on our diet, and then the flip side of that is whether our diet is actually affecting our sleep as well, which is often underlooked, I think. So just to break down on today's podcast and how we're going to run it. Initially, we're going to give you a little breakdown on sleep itself, define sleep, talk about the different stages of sleep, so you get a better understanding. And then we'll delve into the topic and see the effect that sleep has on our diet. Okay. Once we've talked about that, we'll flip it around. We'll talk about the effect of diet, if there is an effect on sleep. And I think we'll wrap this up by giving some advice and some things that we've picked up through experience, and also some tips to help you get a more restful night's sleep and improve that. And I think we might need that as well sometimes. And
So with the introduction to sleep, so obviously it's a complex biological process. And you and I, we've discussed this previously, not only in preparation for this podcast, but obviously we've been busy with studies, juggling life, and wanting to understand what sleep actually is. So we've discussed about the 4 stages of sleep, which obviously each stage has its benefit, and looking at stage 1. So would you like to delve into sort of
absolutely.
what that looks like?
Yeah, so it's broken down usually into 4 stages. 3 of the stages are what we call non-REM or non-rapid eye movement sleep. Okay, and the last stage, the 4th stage, is what we call REM sleep, which is rapid eye movement sleep. Okay. For stage 1, or it's also called N1, is basically a transitional stage. Okay, a part of the cycle is when you're basically going through. Have you ever been like, you're about to fall asleep and you you get woken up and there's a sudden instant in time where you're like, where the hell am I?
Yep.
You know, that transitional phase, which takes about 5 to 10 minutes, where you're going from wakefulness to sleep. It's that period where basically everything starts to become more sedentary, and you're getting into that zone of sleep.
That's the couch sleep surface, man. That's the.
Yeah, that's exactly it. That is exactly it.
That's Mike O'Keefe.
Shut up, Mike. Oh my god.
Sorry, Us. Please continue. So stage 1, 5 to 10 minutes.
That's the one.
You're couch sleeping.
That's
Yes.
N1 Mike O'Keefe stage.
Oh, bro.
Oh, he's gonna love this. He's gonna be all
serious.
over this.
I thought we were gonna be serious. Okay, and then so we go from there into stage 2.
Stage
so known
2.
as a sleep spindle
Yes.
or K-complex stage.
Exactly. What sleep spindles are?
What is that?
Yeah, well, basically, it's when you look at a graph of sleep, or it's measuring sleep. Spindles is basically when you get a little bit of brain activity there, and that is specific. That stage is important for memory consolidation. Okay, not as much as REM sleep, which we'll get into that, but it is. You can there is some evidence to show that there is some activity there to do with memory consolidation.
Yep.
And that period lasts around about 20 minutes, give or take.
So we're 30 minutes into our sleep journey for stages 1 and 2.
Yep.
And then we go into stage 3, which is a slow, deep stage.
Yep.
And then here, high amplitude delta waves.
Exactly. So stage 1 and 2 is what we call lightest sleep, stage 1, and then light sleep, stage 2, and then we move into deep sleep.
Yep.
Which is the third stage. And again, this is a non-REM, non-rapid eye movement stage.
Yep.
And this takes about, how long does this take about?
So 20 to 40 minutes for this one.
20 to 40 minutes.
And this is where I think it's important to note for athletes, this in stage 3 is where you get your muscle and tissue repair. So that's why me and Marvin always need stage 3, because we're high performance athletes.
Absolutely. This is the stage where the body starts to go quite limp and completely sedentary. The muscles begin to relax completely. Your heart rate slows down. Your temperature goes down as well. You start to cool down. And exactly like you mentioned, Robin, it is very, very important for tissue repair. So not just muscles, tendons, ligaments, capsules, everything, all the tissues in the body. So really, really important stage there. And that, again, takes about 20 to 40 minutes. And then you start to delve into REM sleep, rapid eye movement sleep, which is also the stage that's believed where most of the dreaming happens.
Yep.
Okay. And that's huge for memory consolidation and just overall cognition in general, where the brain is actually, when you look at non-REM sleep, the brain is not too active. It's somewhat sedentary. Once you get to REM sleep, the brain is actually highly active, very, very active. So some parts of the brain are actually more active during REM sleep than wakefulness, which is quite interesting. When you look at the electroencephalogram, fancy word, EEG, which is basically when you put all these wires in the brain. I don't know if you've seen those images where people wired and chipped up, and you see certain areas of brain activity firing off. We look at specifically the prefrontal cortex is highly, highly active, which is so important for regulating emotion and impulses. So that's super, super active, and different areas as well with the hypothalamus and memory zones of the brain just firing off.
That's why it's important that your partner gets good sleep to regulate the mood.
That's all it's for, really. That's the importance. That's what we want to cover.
So men, if you're getting in trouble, make sure you're making no noise so your partner can get to stage 4 and then, sleep to uphold a better emotional state the following day.
Exactly.
So my question is that for those people that night shift workers or people that struggle to sleep, are there any detrimental health consequences for not getting sleep? Like, so you're talking about just now about the, in terms of like cognitional function and repair.
Yeah.
So without sleep, are there any consequences?
Absolutely. There are consequences with night sleepers. There are some studies actually done on flight attendants who go on to long haul flights and where they're constantly changing timelines and the times changing, and the activity of the hippocampus, and that is greatly reduced actually, which is especially to do with short-term memory span.
Yep.
But overall, in terms of the repair of the neuronal pathways and things like that, is detrimented for sure with lacking sleep, whether it's night shifters or just if your particular lifestyle does not suit or allow you to get a restful nights of sleep.
Like DJs.
Like DJs.
Very challenging.
Good point you mentioned. Yeah. So on average, what the research suggests, humans require around 7 to 8 hours of sleep. And if you look at a bell curve, the majority of the population, and it's a very steep bell curve, the majority of the population require between 7 and 8 hours of sleep. Some people fell beyond that bell curve, need a bit more, and some people need a bit less.
Yep.
But it's a very small percentage. A lot of people, sometimes you hear like, oh, I function just fine on 4 hours. That is very, very unlikely.
I would like to know what they'll do off 6 or more.
Yeah, exactly. You'll see how active their brain would be. Maybe they're used to it for so long that this is their new norm. But there's plenty of research to suggest in terms of cognition deficits and also physical deficits in terms of performance. So all that goes down.
Yep.
Yeah. So it's basically those 4 stages. It takes about give or take 90 minutes to go through one round, and in one whole night's sleep, person goes through 4 to 6 stages.
Yep.
Of those rounds. Usually with REM sleep, you'll start off actually the first REM sleep of the first cycle, first stage, takes about 10 to 20 minutes, doesn't go to 60. And then as you go one cycle after another, that REM sleep increases. It gets more and more as you progress through the night, which is also, I think, quite interesting.
Yep.
So
then you're cutting yourself short.
Yeah.
So if each full cycle is 90 minutes or maybe potentially a little bit longer, and you're only getting 4 hours sleep, you're not even going to go through a full REM cycle.
Exactly. That's important to mention. I think if we're spending a third of our life sleeping, I think it's important to know and understand the science behind sleep and why we need it and what it's actually doing to our bodies. So I think it's really important to look into these cycles and why our body needs it, both physically and mentally and cognitively. Yeah. So I think we'll talk. We've covered that sleep and just an introduction on sleep. We'll talk about some of the diseases in terms of Alzheimer's, stroke, cardiovascular disease, diabetes. All those are related to lack of sleep or poor sleep. And it's an array. You look at different arrays. Alzheimer's is a cognitive disease, and stroke and cardiovascular disease. You're wondering like how's that happening? But it all happens in diabetes. More and more studies done looking into obesity and diabetes, so different array of health issues and diseases related to lack of sleep gives us more importance of why we need to look at this.
I have a question.
Go on.
So in New Zealand alone, are we the 3rd country in the world to have an obesity issue? Are we the 3rd?
I think
we're definitely top 5. I know that for a fact, but
we're high up there for sure.
So how does the sleep, because I've heard of various hormones before known as Ghrelin and Leptin. So, and you're just talking about how sleep can induce obesity. How does that all happen?
So many ways we can look at this, and I think we will talk about it in terms of what it's doing to other hormones, specifically with cortisol. And we've talked about in previous podcasts that we talk about the hypothalamus pituitary adrenal axis, the HPA-axis, and how that plays a role, and how cortisol can lead to stress eating and eating more, and leading to things like obesity and diabetes. But it also plays around with hormones like insulin, and so both glucose tolerance becomes impaired with lack of sleep. Plenty of research to support that, as well as insulin sensitivity becomes decreased. Okay, so basically, those are the stepping stones to developing metabolic syndrome and type 2 diabetes. Okay, and which in hand, obviously, type 2 diabetes can be linked with obesity. So there's so many different passages and ways where lack of sleep or sleep deprivation can lead to gain weight, as well as different types
Well, we
of
know
diseases.
eating a lot can gain weight.
There you go. There you go. Yeah, which we'll talk about. Actually, we'll open that topic now in terms of how sleep can affect what we eat and how much we eat. Okay, and there's quite a bit of research done on this actually. Specifically, we'll break it down. You mentioned ghrelin and leptin. Okay, two important hunger and satiety hormones. Okay, so if you think about leptin, which decreases our appetite, and ghrelin increases our appetite. Okay, and they both function on the hypothalamus. Okay, and it happens almost all the time. If we are sleep deprived, leptin activity goes down, and there's less binding of leptin in our hypothalamus, and there's increased binding of ghrelin in our hypothalamus. So basically, we are feeling hungrier more often and fuller less often.
Yeah.
Okay, and it happens across the board. And we look at, depending on how much you're lacking sleep, the more sleep deprived you are, the stronger this association is. Okay, so if you're getting, and most of these studies are done on 6 hours or less, but there have been studies showing people getting 7 hours, 6 hours, 5, 4. The more this is the case, the more people usually feel hungrier the next day, and you get increase of ghrelin activity and reduced leptin activity. So you're not feeling full and always feeling hungry.
The body's not seeing the stop sign.
Exactly.
Saying, come on, Marvin, that's enough. I'm filled up. And that's why I think sleep-deprived individuals make poorer health choices in terms of their food as well, reaching for the packet of chips or lollies, something for that quick fix, for the energy quick fix. I've got a lot of friends and family members that coffee is their primary source of energy, but then I think that's more the lack of sleep. And there's not a lot of evidence around like this food choices for individuals. However, there was documented research in Japan that looked at workers, those that you mentioned before, sleeping 6 hours or less, and those sleeping over 6 hours, right?
Yeah.
And then those people had irregular meal pattern times, and had poorer food choices. They would eat out more frequently. And that's just from sleep deprivation.
Yeah.
Nothing else was included.
Yeah, absolutely. And there is a theory about the brain feeling that it's lacking energy because you're sleep deprived, and it tricks the system into, I'm lacking energy because I'm malnourished and I might need more food. And it's a bit of a complex situation where you start to want food more, and part of it is through that ghrelin and leptin pathway of you feeling hungrier because you feel like you require more energy because you're sleep deprived as opposed to being malnourished.
Yeah.
So it's an interesting hypothesis that's looked into. The other thing is, so that's ghrelin and leptin working in the hypothalamus in that way with sleep deprivation. The other one is the HPA-axis that we mentioned earlier, okay, which is the hypothalamus pituitary adrenal axis. Fancy way of saying the relationship between the hypothalamus, the pituitary glands, and the adrenal glands. They basically decide and regulate the secretion or the production of cortisol, which is a stress hormone. When we feel stress, our body secretes cortisol, okay? And what research looked into is when people are sleep deprived with sleeping 6 hours or less, the activity of the hypothalamus, the HPA-axis, increases and secretes more cortisol. Okay? And so there is a positive correlation with reduced REM sleep. If REM sleep reduces, there is an increase secretion of cortisol in our system. Okay? So there's a negative correlation, I should say. And there is a positive correlation of an increased level of cortisol in our system and increased consumption of calories.
Yep.
Okay, so long story short, we have little REM sleep, insufficient sleep. We have a spike in our cortisol levels, and because our cortisol levels are high, we tend to eat more. Okay, so then it goes hand in hand with stress eating. Stress eating is a is
form of stress.
exactly.
Obviously,
That's what it is, and
that
it's
induces people want to consume food.
exactly. So it's a very real thing. When you're stressed, you tend to eat more, and it's mainly because of the hormone cortisol in your
Yep.
system. And
Depending on people's emotional state, right?
Exactly.
The body can see that as another form of stress. And it's all coming back to what you're talking about.
Yeah, exactly. You can see how that can be a downward spiral, can't you? Because if you're increased cortisol in your system because you're lacking sleep, okay, you get to stress eat, but you're also stressed because you're not sleeping enough. Because lack of sleep sometimes can cause stress to people.
Yep.
So you get even more stressed, and you're just going into this cortisol loop of hell.
Yeah,
down to the
going
bottom.
downwards.
Yeah, downwards.
Going downwards.
Where you're overeating and undersleeping.
Yeah.
And it's not a healthy pathway to live on.
So then we've talked about, before you mentioned the prefrontal cortex, right?
Yeah.
And that's the emotional state and sleep example. And that's where the reward brain center is.
Yeah.
So why does the lack of sleep affect the prefrontal cortex and that reward system center?
Yeah, interesting, very interesting point, because like we mentioned, this is a completely different way that how sleep can affect our diet is through the prefrontal cortex. And as we mentioned earlier, through EEG or electroencephalogram, when they wire all the brain up. Now, during REM sleep, the prefrontal cortex that's when all the consolidation happens there. Okay,
Yep.
There's so much work being done, and it's so important for us to get that REM sleep for our prefrontal cortex. But when you're sleep deprived, even upon waking, so they've got those electrograms in the brain, right? Even when you're waking up, they look at prefrontal cortex as actually less active as a person who's had a restful 8-hour sleep, which is very, very interesting, because having a less active prefrontal cortex, which we mentioned earlier, is important for regulating emotion and impulses. It actually inhibits impulses. Okay, so if you find a cake or a beautiful laid out dessert, okay, and you're sleep deprived, and say you've got a goal of weight loss and you want to control your weight, or you want to lose weight, okay, and we know that sleep deprivation leads to inhibited prefrontal cortex and therefore inhibited impulses. So when you look at that dessert, you're going to be more likely to eat it and not be able to withhold that impulse, okay, and bystand it. Whereas if you've had a restful night's sleep, your prefrontal cortex might cue you and remind you, like, by the way, your goal is to lose weight, and nowhere in your goal schedule does that cake fit in, okay? And you might be alerted that way, and you make a more conscious decision, whereas when you're sleep deprived, that's not happening.
So having adequate sleep, then would you say would actually change eating behavior, change eating habits?
100%. So we mentioned how cortisol can lead to stress eating and increase of calorie consumption. Here, with the prefrontal cortex, it's not just an increase of calorie consumption, but it's also the type of foods you're having. Okay? There's been plenty of studies showing when the prefrontal cortex is inactive and when you're sleep deprived, you tend to choose calorie or energy-rich foods as opposed to nutrient-dense foods. Okay? So people tend to go for high-fat, refined carbohydrates, like the cakes and chocolates and lollies, and less so with fruits and vegetables and grains. And there's plenty of research done that. You reminded me actually of the book Why We Sleep by Matthew Walker, who's done plenty of research on sleep. Good book to read and delve into if you want to find out more on sleep. But they did an experiment where they had individuals sleeping in a household, right? And they controlled the sleep of these individuals, okay? It was a household where food was readily available, okay? And it was all types of food. Whole grains, whole foods, fruits and vegetables, but they also had a cupboard of lollies, chocolates, high salt, high sugar, and calorie-dense snacks in that cupboard, okay?
I'm glad you said snacks and not food.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's not food.
Yeah, so what they found out is the individuals who lacked sleep or were woken up every time with 6 hours or less sleep tend to delve into that cupboard a lot more often than people who had a restful 8-hour sleep. who tend to actually have more regular eating habits. So they were more likely to make a breakfast, lunch, and dinner, the people who slept 8 hours. And those who lacked or sleep deprived tend to have an irregular sleeping pattern, where sometimes they'd wake up, they'd skip breakfast, they'll start snacking, and they'll eat, usually our snacks are quite calorie dense, and you're full, then you kind of have a half-assed lunch, and then you get really hungry, so you snack again with a calorie dense. So very calorie dense diet, but nutrient deficient diet.
Yeah.
So I think it was an interesting study to see how that prefrontal cortex is acting, because you're waking up, you're not able to regulate your emotions. You're basically, your choice of food is based less on health and weight control and based more on mood and convenience. That's what it is.
Yeah. And that's all from sleep deprivation.
Yeah.
So with people eating, your snack foods, high sugary foods, ran on emotional status, obviously that's going to have effect on adenosine, which is what we know as known as a precious sleeper, or something that's going to promote sleep. But what you're saying, if these people are doing emotional eating, at the end of the day, they're going to be starting to blunt that adenosine response.
Exactly.
Lead to poor sleep, lead to melatonin production, can't get to sleep, can't fall asleep, can't stay asleep.
Yeah.
And then that cycle is going to repeat.
Yeah,
Monday to Sunday.
Vicious cycle.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly it. So yeah, that's so many different pathways we've already discussed. We've discussed the hormones leptin and ghrelin and how they have an effect on the hypothalamus. Then we've also talked about the HPA-axis and how cortisol makes us stress eat, and it's increased with sleep deprivation. And also we've got what we talked about, the prefrontal cortex being less active in people who are sleep deprived, and therefore they are a lot more impulsive eaters and tend to choose calorie-rich foods as opposed to nutrient-rich foods.
Yep.
Yeah, so many different ways to look into it, and so many different pathways how sleep deprivation is affecting our eating habits. What else? We talked about... furthermore, actually, we should discuss, we talked about obesity, and people who are sleep deprived, research suggests that are 25% more likely to become obese or be obese than those who are not, which is quite a high number, and then quite a worrying number. And it's interesting because we look at different habits that people who lack sleep that do have, and they tend to skip breakfast.
Yep.
A lot more often.
And we'll make up the calories somewhere else during the day, potentially.
Exactly. You're skipping breakfast is a very important thing. I think one way to control your food habits is have your breakfast.
Yep.
It controls what meal you have afterwards and how many calories that meal has.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, it can set you up for the day, right, and make you have regular eating patterns, which seems to be the case for a lot of people that are struggling.
Yeah.
With that sleep deprivation. And I think people being aware that they are going through the cycle that we've explained from the start, this staircase spiraling downwards, is getting to grips of maybe implementing some of these habit changes.
Yeah.
So then they can start to improve their sleep and have the positive consequences from having good sleep. But yeah, I think habit changing is going to be one of the most important things people need to implement today.
Yeah, 100%. And it's interesting, we mentioned it in our previous podcast, how you can improve one particular aspect of life and everything else has almost a snowball effect on everything. So, if you just fix your sleeping or add an extra hour in your sleep, you'll find you're eating a little bit better. You'll find a little bit you're more motivated to exercise and so on and so forth. Even mentally, you're going to be less stressed. Less tired and less cortisol production. You're going to be nicer to your partner as well. So we always tend to lead to talking about how nice you are to your partner.
It's important. Got to keep people together.
Yeah.
So this would lead into a question I have about. So we've discussed about sleep deprivation and what that does to nutrition, or to food, or to food choices.
Yeah.
So then, for the people out there, does diet or does the food choices we make today have an effect on our sleep? You know, is there the other way around?
Yeah, so the reversal of that is
Yeah.
that you're asking how diet can possibly affect, or if
Like
it can
like
affect
if
our
I
sleep.
eat chocolate, right, at 8 p.m. versus having a kiwi fruit
Yeah,
as such, does that have any
yeah.
influence on our sleep?
Absolutely. Yeah. So it's a interesting topic, and in fact, this particular, once we look at the inverse of this association or relationship, research is not as prominent as it is on in terms of the effect of sleep on diet. All right. So not as much. More and more research has come up in the last, I think, 10 to 12 years, looking into this topic. And a lot of it is looking at three main compounds: tryptophan, serotonin, melatonin. Okay. And if we look at, they're all associated, obviously, because tryptophan produces or has, through synthesis, it creates serotonin. And through serotonin is actually a precursor of melatonin. Which we know melatonin is used in medication to help people sleep. So that thing
knock
puts
people
you out. That thing knocks you out. Okay. So most of the research is looked into those three and foods containing tryptophan, serotonin, or melatonin.
Yep.
Okay. And so just going over it, tryptophan-rich food or with foods rich in serotonin include milk is a big one. It's actually got the highest amount of tryptophan, which is actually an amino acid, we should mention. It's found in many sources of protein or food that contain protein. Milk's a good one.
Your white meat.
Your white
turkey,
meats
chicken.
contain turkey and chicken. You've also got oats is actually quite high. Pumpkin seeds are super high in tryptophan. You've also got some fruits and vegetables that contain tryptophan. Specifically, you mentioned kiwi fruit.
Yep.
And also tart cherries.
For your tofu lovers out there.
Tofu
quite
lovers.
high. Soybeans.
Absolutely. So all those nuts and seeds contain quite a bit of tryptophan as well. So most of the research done that I looked to specifically was done on tart cherries, kiwi fruits.
So they're not, just to clarify, tart cherries are not your sweet, wholesome, juicy, enjoyable dessert cherries, people. They are tarty.
Tarty,
sour
yeah.
in taste.
They're a
May
little
make
bit
you-
more red, aren't they? Because the
Yeah.
sweet ones are a little bit darker and almost purple in color.
Yeah.
These ones are more red, but they tend to contain quite a bit of. They actually contain melatonin as well, but they contain tryptophan.
Yeah.
Studies I looked into also have milk. Interesting study I looked into milk is actually if you milk a cow, here's an interesting fact for you. If you milk a cow at night, it has ample loads of melatonin in that milk. Okay, so you've got more melatonin if you milk your cow at night and put you to sleep. So that whole myth of having a warm glass of milk before sleep is actually real. It does happen. It does put you to sleep. Too much dairy obviously has a lot of different other side adverse health effects. So we don't really recommend that too much. Not having a glass of milk every day. But things like kiwi fruits, tart cherries, bananas, as well as pumpkin seeds, nuts and seeds.
So it may help for individuals to incorporate this if they aren't already later on in the afternoon to match that natural circadian rhythm of sleep cycles.
Yeah.
So start incorporating these foods we're just talking about, maybe 3 p.m. onwards.
Yeah, 3 p.m. onwards. And they can help you get to sleep and help aid with melatonin production, like we explained.
Yep.
So that's one thing. What we need to know about the activity of tryptophan is in order to activate tryptophan, there's competition with it, right? So there's what we call large neutral amino acids. They bind to the same receptors as tryptophan, okay? So if they're taken over and binding over, tryptophan can't have that effect and it can't put you to sleep, right? So that's really important to understand. And to counteract that or to increase the tryptophan to large neutral amino acid ratio, we need to have a high carbohydrate diet. Okay, which we'll talk about the macronutrients soon, but we'll just cover the specific foods for now. So yeah, so having a high carbohydrate diet keeps that ratio quite high, keeps your tryptophan plasma levels quite high. Therefore, they can take an effect.
Yeah.
And help you sleep a bit more.
So you're mentioning before how the tryptophan is in higher protein sources, right?
Yeah.
So would you recommend that like having a good amount of carbohydrates and protein meals sort of later on in that afternoon/evening would be beneficial more so than your high fats, high protein or high fats and high carbs if people want to induce better sleep?
Exactly. That is exactly it. And we will delve into that a little bit more in terms of macronutrients and whether there is a correct ratio that's going to help you sleep a bit more. We mentioned high carbohydrate diet is beneficial, but we'll cover that a little bit more shortly. But that's what's important. The inverse relationship is actually true. Having very low tryptophan will lead to bad quality of sleep. And that's been reported through literature as well. So it's important to see high tryptophan helps sleep. No, or deprivation of tryptophan leads to bad sleep.
Yep.
So important to notice there. The fiber was an interesting one as well. If we look at food sources, we talked about fiber, how important it is, and there's another bit of importance with fiber. Yep. And high fiber in your diet tends to actually increase N3 or stage 3 of sleep, which we mentioned is deep sleep for tissue repair.
Yep.
It's super important. It slightly reduces N1 sleep, which is the lighter sleep, that transitional phase, which you can argue it's actually better because you get to sleep earlier.
Yep.
But it increases deep sleep, which is an interesting finding again. Another supplement or a particular mineral was zinc that they looked into. And there were studies done on zinc supplementations as well as studies done on food rich in zinc. Specifically, I think they looked at oysters, zinc-rich oysters. And they also improved quality of sleep, but also the sleep onset latency, meaning, when you go to bed and you're struggling to fall asleep and you're tossing and turning and you can't fall asleep.
Yep.
Well, zinc tends to help with that and tends to put you to sleep a little bit earlier and quicker, as opposed to you rolling and flipping in bed and struggling to fall asleep.
Yep.
So those are the main contents. Most of us looked into tryptophan, serotonin, melatonin, but zinc and fiber are other factors that tend to be beneficial for our sleep. So
implementing all of it.
Basically, a healthy, wholesome, whole food diet, nutritional diet, and it's
funny you say that, Marvin, because I'm sure that when we're working with our online clients, we take this literature and implement that straight into their nutritional regime. So if you want to sleep better, work with us today.
I think absolutely.
And we'll take the thinking out of it and put all this in for you.
We'll make it simple. We'll simplify it for you. You ain't got to do nothing. But that's the thing. I mean, a lot of people look into like, is there a perfect diet to help you sleep? Is there a perfect diet to prevent cardiovascular disease? Is there a perfect diet? What's the perfect diet for getting lean and cut? The reality of it is, in terms of health and a healthy diet, there is actually a one-size-fits-all. If you're having a nutrient-rich diet filled with fruits and vegetables, grains, legumes, whole foods, you're just about there in every other aspect. In terms of performance and in terms of health. So that's important to notice. And don't really delve into and being like, I need to find food rich in tryptophan. If you're having a whole balanced diet with whole foods, chances are your tryptophan levels are going to be just fine. You don't need to stress. But those are tips and things that you can look into if you are possibly struggling, and you might find it beneficial for you or a family member who's struggling.
And that's probably because it holds a lot more macronutrients, what you were explaining before, right?
Exactly.
And altering ratios within our body.
Absolutely, yeah, which we'll delve into macronutrients now. So we mentioned a rich carbohydrate diet.
Well, what sort of carbs would you recommend? Because I just don't want people to get a mixed message about carbohydrates being a good source of like potato chips or fries as an example.
Exactly. So none of that.
None of that. None of that.
Yeah.
So like your kumara, your
Yep.
potato, your brown rice.
Absolutely, your good, healthy mixed grain pastas are really good as well. But also just vegetables and fruits in general. Having those will be of great benefit. And yeah, so we're kind of separating refined carbohydrates. That's outside of the equation. It's actually seen to be affecting our sleep, and it gives you a struggle to get to sleep having refined carbohydrates. Funnily enough, also a high fat diet, and looked at ketosis when you're in the stage of ketosis, which is usually comes in when you're in a diet super high in fat and very low in carbohydrate. And there's been very limited studies on this, and in terms of the sleep cycle, it stays similar length, but what happens is that REM sleep is reduced greatly when you're in a ketogenic diet, which is interesting. And REM sleep, we know, is so important for memory consolidation and overall cognition. So, yeah, and again, it's got other adverse health effects with ketogenic diet and staying on that for too long. So we don't recommend it anyway. Having a carbohydrate-rich diet, you're better off, especially if the carbs are coming from whole foods.
Yep.
You mentioned high protein, which is interesting because there was studies showing that participants with a high protein diet tend to have less wake episodes. So during sleeps, every now and then you'll hop out of the cycle, you'll go through a bout of waking up, and then you'll bounce back in. And having a super low protein diet tends to wake you up throughout the night a little bit more often.
Yeah.
Okay. So that was an interesting finding. But yeah, the same thing we mentioned. So it's not only because carbohydrate-rich diet not only shifts that tryptophan ratio up, but it also helps give you nutrients.
Yep.
And I think, I've got this theory where it's like, I don't know, when you're like 10 p.m., you decide to drive in the motorway, and there's all this construction happening, and there's new roads being created, there's roads being fixed.
Yep.
I feel like when you're sleeping, that's what the brain's trying to do. Okay? It's trying to fix neurons. It's trying to create new passageways, new electrical passageways from one side of the brain to the other. Everything's trying to get to work and try to fix and for you to become healthy. Now, when the brain's trying to do that, it's going to try to pull vitamin B12 from here, B6 from there. We need you in this task. We need potassium, zinc. We need you to do this job for us. Hundreds of thousands of chemicals, minerals, and vitamins coming together to try to do a job for us to keep our brain healthy and keep our brain developing and staying in good shape. Now, you can imagine if the brain is deprived of all those nutrients, it's going to probably try wake you up in the hopes that this person's going to wake up and eat something so we can get back to work, So, it's like building a house, and then the electrician can't do their job because the jib board layer is not doing their job and the flooring's not done. So in order to get a good night's sleep, I guess it's a good way. I don't know if it's a well-established theory. I just made it up while I was thinking and researching about this topic. But I think it's important to have all these nutrients readily available for the brain to pull from for you to have a good night's sleep and be like, okay, we've got everything we need. You do you, let me do me. Yep. All right. And then REM sleep can take place and deep sleep can take place. So I think it's a nice way to think about it, filling your body with the nutrients it requires to let the sleep take its toll and give you a restful night's sleep.
Yep. So allow for a full body restoration.
Yeah.
Full repair, so you can tackle the next day. So I like your analogy because I was just thinking about driving to work.
Yeah.
4 lanes. Now, if the same construction workers weren't able to pull, your vitamin B12, vitamin A and K into the mix, and 2 lanes are blocked, that would have huge consequences on me being able to get to work if there's only 2 lanes open.
Yeah.
So imagine for those people that are always functioning off 1 or 2 lanes, when they have a 6-lane highway.
Oh, beautiful.
On a day-to-day basis.
Good analogy.
How would you be a a good worker, a good participant of your family, it would have huge amounts of consequences right through your whole life. So
Yeah,
definitely a cool
absolutely.
analogy, man. Some good food for thought.
I think so. I think so. And then not only that, your brain's actually trying to create shortcuts and new pathways as well. It's constant growth.
More lanes.
More lanes.
Go from 6 to 8.
Hopefully, it doesn't take as long as Auckland construction. But yeah, you'd hope it's a little bit quicker during REM sleep. But yeah, I think it's a nice way to think about it. Definitely.
Yeah.
Nice way to yeah, it gives you kind of motivates me to have good food and doing that. Yeah, additional on that is particular habits in terms of snacking just before. Lots of people say, "Oh, is it good to eat directly before sleep?" And quick short answer is no. Don't eat a big snack or a massive meal. Having a few. A little snack with nuts and seeds or whatever it may be, something small might be okay. It can fly, or an apple. But having a massive sleep can actually cause stomach disturbances. And even though that you don't feel it, your stomach might feel fine. But because it's trying to digest and do that, it might wake you up during sleep, or it might cause disturbances in the cycles of sleep, which can affect sleep. So best idea is, if you can, don't eat too much, 2 hours before you sleep. And if you really are hungry or hangry, try to have a quick snack that way, and that might be beneficial for you.
So that would lead into some really good, I guess, sleep hygiene habits, right?
I think so. Just to give the people, I think we like to always, give people what they want.
But that could be one. That could be one. Don't eat. Let's just say your golden rule, and people will be able to self-monitor, is that maybe don't eat 90 minutes before retiring to sleep.
Yeah. Think about it this way. If you're entering a stage of rest, give your stomach a rest as well, and just let your body just rest in complete peace and harmony, for goodness sake.
Yep. So make it part of your routine.
Exactly.
Find your routine before sleep.
Exactly. And a routine is a big one. I think the body is very rhythmic. We talk about circadian rhythm of sleep. And funnily enough, circadian rhythm is almost down to our genetics. It hardly does change. Some people are naturally born early birds, and others...
Night
owls, okay, and some of that, and obviously there's a spectrum of that. There's no like direct early bird and night owl. Everyone falls somewhere within that spectrum, and you can hardly change that. That's you're kind of born with that, and that's important. Understanding and establishing your circadian rhythm, and if you can, especially with work hours, trying to adjust your work hours and become flexible so you are actually getting good night's sleep. And our bodies are very rhythmic and love a routine. So the time you go to sleep one day, try to keep it the same every single day of the week. You're sleeping at whatever it may be, 9 p.m., 10 p.m., 11 p.m., and waking up at exactly the same time the next day. Whatever fits your circadian rhythm. Or if you're Robin, get to sleep by 7 p.m.
Put the kids down and go to sleep myself.
Yeah, so a routine is a really nice thing to establish, and getting into that rhythm. What do you think of exercise at night?
No. Well, you've already mentioned it before about the cortisol spike and the consequences that has, and sort of elevate and get people alert and awake.
Absolutely.
So what happens when we do any form of exercise, really, apart from yoga? Yoga is absolutely fantastic before sleep, but you wouldn't see me and Marvin doing a HIIT training, sprints, pumping some heavy iron close to sleep, just because that's going to make us alert, make us, empowered, vigorated, give us the energy. So I'd say no, stick to either in the morning, lunchtime, very early in the afternoon.
Yeah, absolutely. I fully agree with that. And I think it's that seesaw between your fight or flight, sympathetic nervous system, and your rest and digest, parasympathetic nervous system. And if you've just had a workout, you've just ramped up your fight or flight response, it's going to be very hard to settle back down and get to sleep. Funnily, you mentioned we had a video shoot at 11 p.m. And this was a one-off, guys. 11 p.m. we went to the gym, just to do a video shoot for LNT, just because we didn't want the gym to be super busy. But interestingly enough, there were people there gymming, and they looked like regulars that they do that for.
I'd say night shift.
Hopefully, it's night shift. I mean, it's not great either way, but yeah, night shift workers gymming 11. We must have gotten out of there by 11:30, and then people still pumping iron.
Well, what time did you get to bed?
I got to bed, I think, at 12:30.
Man, I was wired to 1 a.m.
Yeah,
just because it affected my personal circadian rhythm so much.
absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah, so it's not recommended unless you want to do a video shoot when the gym's quiet.
Yeah, and so this is a message for Michael O'Keefe. Caffeine consumption.
Shout out
to
Mike.
Michael O'Keefe. It's very important to keep your caffeine reduction to a minimal, if possible, or try to have it earlier on. I'd say the magic number is probably around lunchtime. No later than that either. So you don't want it first thing when you wake up to allow adenosine to flush out of the body. Have your coffee, around 10, 11, 12?
Yeah, 10, 11, 12, no further than that. Yeah, definitely. Then cut your caffeine.
Yeah, the body prepares itself for sleep from 2 p.m. onwards.
We set up, I wrote a questionnaire on our Instagram, and you know who you are. I won't mention any names. And I said, do you have a bedtime snack? And if so, what is it? And we got biscuit and a cup of coffee.
Hold on, what do they look like? Just a quick description.
No, I can't.
No, just quickly. I'll just see if I can guess.
It's a female. That's all I'm going to give you. I'm not going to sink in any more information than that. A cup of coffee just before night. Okay, so if you think...
A cup of coffee and a biscuit.
And a biscuit.
That's sugar and caffeine.
Just ping you right up.
Oi, whoever you are, Mr. or Mrs. or Miss?
Mrs.
Ooh.
Oh, I'll tell you after the podcast. We'll keep it confidential. But so
why can't we call them out?
A lot of people say, "Oh, I'm fine. I'm used to it. I'm used to."
Connor McCarthy.
Connor.
This is you. No, you're not fine to be having stimulated drinks before bed.
Yeah, and you might feel like you.
That's why your bench is still under 100.
Stop having caffeine at night. Increase your bench.
You want a better deadlift? Stop having Red Bull before sleep.
Oh my God. Don't get me started with the Red Bull. But that's the thing. People say I'm used to it. And actually, some people, there is a tolerance and your body develops a tolerance and you get to sleep a lot earlier. But that does not mean that sleep is not disturbed. And you're going to have
It'll be fragmented.
Bouts of wakefulness and it'll be fragmented and you won't be able to get deep enough REM sleep or deep sleep.
Mrs. Whoever you are, when you wake up in the morning and you look in the mirror and you see the bags... You cut out that biscuit and that coffee, please.
Cut it out, okay? And not to mention, scientifically, the reason why we're mentioning that is because caffeine has a half-life of about 6 to 8 hours, okay? So what half-life means is your body takes 6 to 8 hours to get rid of only half that caffeine, okay? A regular cup of, if you're thinking about a long black, has about 120, 130 milligrams of caffeine in it. So 6 to 8 hours, if you're having that at, say, 2 p.m., come by close to 10 p.m., you've got half of that still running in your system, okay? And what that does is that it blocks melatonin production. And if you can't produce melatonin, you cannot get to sleep or you struggle to get to sleep. When you do get to sleep, it's going to be interrupted.
And then you're irritable, angry, and your prefrontal cortex is like scrambled eggs.
Absolutely. That's all it is. So cut out the caffeine. It's just no good.
And we have had questions around alcohol before bed. No. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, no.
Don't be silly.
Guys, refer to our podcast that we did on alcohol.
Yes, don't be
you'll
silly.
You'll understand what that's doing is specifically to the REM sleep. It just disrupts it directly. The same with cannabis and marijuana. A lot of people say, it acts as a sedative and it puts you to sleep. But that's exactly what's happening. Oh, dog's having a mighty good time.
Calm down, Jet.
Yeah, it's exciting. As soon as we mention alcohol, every time wants to get on it.
He must be watching his parents.
But that's it. Alcohol is a definite no-no. The same thing with marijuana. Directly.
It won't either. Alcohol or marijuana won't help people unwind.
Absolutely
You
not.
need to allow time for your body to
Yeah,
unwind.
it gives you the sensation,
Not a substance.
that you are relaxed. It gives you that sensation of your kind of in a sedative state. But sleep is not a sedative state. It's a completely different thing.
Yeah.
And actually, like we mentioned, your brain's highly active during sleep, and it's required. That activity is required. And having cannabis, a lot of people I've heard as well say, "Oh, it just helps me shut down and go to sleep." No, it doesn't.
No.
Yeah,
That's
no,
why your bench is also under 100.
That's yeah.
Yeah.
It's so important, and plus you're probably gonna be very hungry as well.
Yeah.
And that hunger and satiety level might wake you up on top of that. So no go in terms of alcohol and in terms of marijuana if you do like to indulge in such things.
The busy folk,
Yeah.
the busy person,
Yeah.
make sure you're allowing enough time to unwind from whatever project.
Yeah.
And I'm basically talking to Marvin, the night owl.
Yeah. Yeah.
If you're full on and you're doing a lot of stuff late at night, make sure you do allocate yourself enough time for your body to unwind and relax. So Marvin already mentioned about the sympathetic nervous system. That's going to make you run away from a lion. Make sure you give adequate time for that to calm down.
Absolutely. And Robin, actually, I've eavesdropped from you once before, and you give a really nice tip to one of your clients in terms of sleep and unwinding, as developing a stretching routine under dimmed lighting or no lighting at all, and stretching, which helps activate or promote the activation of the parasympathetic rest and digest state, which can in turn help you unwind and go to sleep a little bit earlier and quicker. I think that's a really nice tip for people to use and utilize. It's a really nice way to help you unwind. Hot showers.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, fan of that.
Yes,
So a
sir.
lot of people think, being warm helps you get to sleep. That's not actually the case with hot showers. Is the fact that you heat up with a hot shower when you come up and lie on
By
on
yourself,
top of yeah, you remember that's activating fight or flight when you're someone else. Hot shower by yourself if you're trying to fall asleep. Don't bring any other person. Don't bring your flatmate in with you.
So, continue.
Yeah.
Please.
So it's the cooling down period after a hot shower is what's going to help you get to sleep. We know that the best temperature for sleep is actually 18 degrees Celsius, which a lot of people might think, oh, geez, that's a bit cool, but that's actually the perfect temperature for the body to get to sleep and stay asleep. 18 degrees Celsius, somewhere between 17 and 19 anyway.
So if you're waking up with your foot, if you've got your whole body under the duvet cover,
Yeah.
and you've got your one foot outside there,
That's me.
your room is too warm.
That is me. Yeah,
Yeah.
it is. It can get quite stuffy. So if you have the ability to change the temperature of your room, do so. Whether you've got an aircon or you can open up a window or doing that just to help aid you. Exactly.
Or put the foot out.
Or put the foot out, or both of them.
What about tablets, phone scrolling, Insta scrolling?
There you go. So again, with that is if we're thinking about devices and blue light exposure, it basically tricks the mind into thinking it's still daytime. Okay, and yeah, so you need it to be night, you need it to be dark in order to increase melatonin production. If there is any blue light exposure, you're suppressing that melatonin production. So very important to leave your devices at the door before entrance into the sleep chamber.
Is there any other related topics you want to sum up or cover off?
I think to sum up is to really, like we mentioned before, fixing one thing will help the other, and it is a vicious cycle. If you're lacking sleep, you're going to have the tendency to eat more and eat worse, okay? And eating more and eating worse will make you sleep a lot worse as well. and it's a downward spiral. Okay, so wherever you want to enter and intervene, do so. Okay, whether it's trying to intervene in terms of your diet or your sleep, it will have a positive effect, if any effect, onto the other paradigm or into the other factor. Okay, so start small, try to improve sleep, try to set a routine. Like we mentioned, every time 9 p.m., 9:30 p.m., I'm going to go to sleep. I'm going to hit the bed and I'm going to wake up at this time. Try to keep consistent with that. And you might find that you're all of a sudden snacking a lot less often, and you're more motivated to have regular eating patterns.
Yep.
With breakfast, lunch, and dinner.
Be disciplined.
Yeah.
Be disciplined in doing this. Make a plan for yourself. Stick to it for at least 4 weeks. Whatever strategy you want to implement, make it happen.
Yeah, like anything, it does require discipline, guys. And in order to seek change, you will need to have an intervention, whether it is with your sleep or your diet. Yeah.
Yep.
I think that's a nice way to cap off. Yeah. Have you got anything else to cover?
No. I think just eat well, regulate your sleep patterns, and feel the changes. It's not something you're going to see. It's something you're going to feel and experience.
That's nice.
So enjoy.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Stay tuned for our next podcast. Hope you enjoyed this one. Thank you for watching. We've done it. Peace out. Shoo.